Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we have a special guest. You know them, you love them. It's Berto.
Goazi dohaname siuna koa karista kuya washista. My name is Roberto, known as Siuna. I'm a tribal member from Pueblo of Laguna in the village Conversita. And it's really an honor to be in Thicc Radio with Tim and James.
Yay, Berto, baby, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much for being on. Oh, I'm so excited to chat to you and just get into all of it. God damn. I'm very excited. It's also, listeners, it's also a Friday. I'm coming off of like a crap week at work. I've had way too much sugar today, so I'm just like, I'm sorted. You know what I mean? I'm good. I'm here with my girls. Girls, we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a chat. It's going to be great. Speaking of which, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. You know, we kind of touch a little bit on the socially side of things at times. And, you know, today is no exception today. But we're coming to you as you are a tribal member of, and I believe it is pronounced Pueblo of Laguna. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it.
Ooh, yes. Okay.
Impressive. I'm happy.
But you come into us as a tribesman, and I'm so excited to just get into all the Indigenous experience, because can you just share with us, like, for starters, what is that experience like for you as an Indigenous person in an online space, just full stop? Like, what is that about?
So personally with me, the way I look at this is me being an Indigenous man is a way of survival in an online site, because one, I experience racism and discrimination and stereotypes of my people 24/7, unfortunately. And using that opportunity to educate non-natives through online in a way to help us to survive in our culture, but also like try to minimize the damage of our imagery in most Indigenous communities. So in a way, like it could be good, but also it can be bad at the same time, the way how people perceive us on their fantasies of our people. So it just really depends on what side or what side you're on in the internet. It's like a hit and miss situation. But in terms of me being an Indigenous man, like I'm proud to be Indigenous, always am, every single day. I have no choice. I'm born with it every single day. And also on top of that, one good thing about y'all is not only do you schedule me in November, but November is actually Indigenous Heritage Month or Native American Heritage Month. So that was actually really good timing of y'all. So I don't know if y'all planned that or not, but it actually worked out. So
We'll go with yes, because I honestly had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it all worked out.
I'm horrible about that kind of thing. Is like just keeping on top of everything. Like James is so much more organized than I am. So we'll just go with yes. James knew he planned this.
I mean, it's funny, like as an Australian, you know, I come from a country where we also have an Indigenous population, and I don't know if there's much of an Indigenous month, but obviously we have a similar situation. Like I believe with you guys, it's similar how there's like Thanksgiving, the holiday and the moment at whoop-de-woo, but for Indigenous people it carries a lot of trauma. Same thing with Australia Day back home, which is January 26th. You know, they picked this day because this was the day that Captain Cook apparently discovered Australia and set foot on the rock or whatever, which marks the beginning of Indigenous subjugation and invasion and all that other kind of stuff. So, you know, different times of the year, but you know, a frustratingly similar experience, you know. So let's get into all of it. So you know what, it's November, we're recording. I want to touch base here. What is that experience like day to day for you within the wider gainer community?
So this is really interesting for me. Because one, I didn't really think of my identity too much on my gaming community, because one, like when I was exposed to the gaining, how do I say this, gaining childhood, like for example, the Santa Claus clique or like iconic gainer people out there. That's where like kind of got my interest about it. But also that when I found out that Grommr existed, I logged in to see what was going on. And to me, it was like heaven for me. One, that I feel validated because I feel like I was an outcast, to be honest with you. And diving into it, like I never seen like so many people are into that kind of thing. And I thought it was great as well. Now, like when I opened my first account under Appa Axe Game, um, the popularity for me went up when I started posting pictures of myself and then my body, etc. But there are time to time basis where like non-natives would pretty much like fetishize me just because of my hair, just because my skin color, and calling me exotic, etc. Basically tokenizing of how I look. And the comments I will be getting time to time basis is how I want to date like exotic man or native man because it's a rare creature. And the thing is, when that person told me a rare creature, I'm like, first of all, I'm human. I'm not a creature. What the hell are you telling me about? Like, what mumbo jumbo are you in this shit right now? But I digress. But anyway, time to time basis is that sometimes I get a complex feeling about me part of as a gainer community, but also me part as indigenous community is one, the indigenous communities are having a same problem when it comes to obesity, heart problems, and also diabetes program. What I mean by that is how, well, after all, the Europeans did bring the sugar, and because they knew we had a sweet tooth. So therefore that resulted, the heart disease, diabetes, anything that is related to obesity. So I think to myself that if anyone like besides indigenous gainers here in this circle, I don't know how they feel about that, because considering how they're trying to reverse that problem while I'm over here, well, gaining my piggies out there too. So that's where the complicity comes in, but also that I'm trying to enjoy what I can, because at the end of the day, I only have one life. So I try not to think about it too much unless that needs to be talked about.
I can imagine that must be a strange paradox for you.
It is. It's a strange paradox for me 24/7, to be honest with you. And honestly, like finally when I was on live chats on Instagram, when there's like another indigenous man had to be a gainer, like one that I feel validated again, and that felt really, really nicely. Like you can never imagine how I felt when I found out there's another indigenous just like me. And it's relieving, and it really helps me to see that, one, like I'm not the only one, because there are times I feel like I'm going crazy because this whole dilemma of the health problems of my people, but I'm over here like doing the opposite of that. So you're right, like it's hard to like to describe this dilemma and this strange paradox between, I guess you could say, civilian versus the gainer world, because technically the civilian world doesn't accept that as like a to normalize this fetish, if that makes sense. But I think we're in the process of that still, as far as what I understand.
Yeah, I think we definitely are in the throes of, and partly I think this is due to the fat acceptance movement, we really are in the throes of having to help the wider world understand that there is a validity to being obese. It's a comparison I've made before, which is that you're allowed to be fat, you're allowed to be thin, you're allowed to be fat and become thin, but you're not allowed to be thin and become fat. Because each and every other one of those, we give reasons for why you should have permission. You have validity as a person. But in society, when you see someone gain weight, the only cultural reasons we suggest that happens is depression, food addiction, anxiety, death in the family, mental health problems. It's trying to help the world understand that there is actually a positive reason for it, and that perhaps that in itself is actually reason enough to give it space to exist. To circle back for a second, you talked a little bit about some of the perceptions that people might have of you, the sort of fetishization or tokenization and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, like, what do you feel is the biggest misconception that people have about Native Americans today?
I would say like talking to animals. I would definitely say that. And also
people really think that.
And also there is a part two about it. People say This very absurd statements, for example, Lady Gaga's my spirit animal, or Tina's my spirit animal. I hear that thing all the time, and it's really annoying to me because like I even hear it from people in the gaming community said the exact same thing too about quote unquote is my spirit animal, where really there's y'all don't know what you're really saying. Where, for example, where I know my spirit animal because I experienced it, where my animal is a white wolf because I experienced it and I know it for the fact. While the other ones use it as part of the trend model in the social life as well. So it's still happening today, unfortunately. And I don't know how many people are still doing it out there, but it sucks hearing that all the time without control.
I'm really glad that you said that because I'm guilty of doing that before. I'm guilty of saying, like I say, I would say like, oh, Daria is my spirit animal, and I was throwing it away and not thinking about it. And oh my God, like thank you, because now I will know not to continue to say things like that. Like that was just blind ignorance on my part, not realizing what I was doing.
You know, I'll own up to that for myself as well. You know, and I think Berto, you and I think might have had a conversation about this. I believe you mentioned the word to me was powwow.
Yes.
See, that was one of those things where I was like, that's a Native American word? And it caught me so off guard because to my mind, like I must have heard that as like a kid in Australia, and it has that kind of like 90s zippy, like, yeah, we're women in the 90s on the go with our shoulder pads, we're gonna have coffee for brunch, and we're gonna have a little powwow and a zip that, you know, and just like just mumbo jumbo jargon of like, you know, the 90s fucking buzzword pop talk type of thing. And like you don't think about it. And then someone takes you aside and goes, that's not what that is.
Right.
And it's interesting. Again, we've had this conversation as an Australian. Obviously, I don't have a point of reference for Native American culture. And yet, that still made its way over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think, very important to acknowledge that would have happened because of easy things like television, which just gets shipped over airwaves to millions of people in a split second.
Mm-hmm.
You come up with a new word, or you use an indigenous word and you don't give it context and you put it somewhere else, and people just pick it up and they go, ooh, powwow, we're all going to use that now. Ooh, spirit animal. Oh, we're doing this. Do. And nobody thinks about it because nobody knows. And then you've got to spend all that time as an indigenous person pointing it out to every single person who walks by using it. You're like, excuse me, that's not
good. Another thing that I want to add though is how I've seen so many non-natives have dream catchers tattoos. And yes, it is an Native American aspect, but this isn't what we represented because that particular dream catcher, it belongs to Ojibwe tribe. They're more specialized on dream catchers, not my people or any other tribes, just Ojibwe people. And not many people knew about that as well. And like you said, though, because the whole movies and TV shows trends of it, automatically they think those are what we're supposed to say in a social life. But obviously, this is a total opposite of that as well. And not just in civilian life, but also in the, also in the gaming world too.
What resources are there for fatter people in an indigenous setting? You know, are there places where you can go to find plus size clothing? I mean, maybe even in traditional indigenous clothing. I mean, is it made for people to be bigger? Is it restrictive in that sense? What is that experience like when it just comes to clothing?
Well, I would definitely say this 100% though, is the clothing that specifically my tribe does, we actually hand stitch them and we custom size of it depending on what sizes this person is, because we do have larger people in our tribe, I will admit, but also we custom size it for them as well. So when it comes to clothing, it's no problem for us. It's just the time consumption of making it is a little bit difficult, but then again, we just made it work for our people as well. So you could say that it's very flexible for us as well. And I can definitely say the same thing with the other tribe as well, where technically most regalias are handmade already by the artists, by the designers, by any indigenous people. Like it's not like branded clothing like for example Walmart, Target, or Hot Topic. this is completely different of what we do right now. So in terms of clothing, we're very flexible on our sizing, thankfully as well.
I'm curious. So prior to colonization, is there any history in your tribe of like, before the Europeans got there, before they introduced bad foods like, processed sugars and all the other things into the common diet, how was being overweight seen before that? Like, do you know, was that seen as a sign of affluence? Was it seen as a sign of power?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I wonder about that myself. And also in terms of like before the Europeans showed up, I also wonder myself is what kind of herbs or food that do we actually look out there? Because I know for the fact how we do hunt for animals for proteins. I know that for the fact. But in terms of the plants, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, like what did we do back then as well? Because this is the part where I'm actually learning myself about the history before the colonization as well. But that is a really good question. And that's something I need to look into. So thanks for that.
You're welcome. I mean, I was just thinking because, when we talk about obesity during the Dark Ages, it was a good thing because it meant you had money.
Right.
So I didn't know if over on the other side of the world, if it was a similar situation. I'm not aware of much of the history of the indigenous people of this side of the planet. So I don't know if they went through their own equivalent of a Dark Age.
Well, it makes me reflect a little bit on an episode of Maintenance Phase, and I've referenced this podcast a couple of times. It's definitely good to tune into, everyone. Maintenance Phase, you can find it on Apple Podcasts everywhere. Give it a listen. It's not gainer-focused, it's fat-focused. So just go into it with the appropriate mindset. But they did an episode speaking about, and I forget this woman's name, but she was a medical professional at the turn of last century who... she went to the Ivory Coast or the Gold Coast of Africa and was with the tribeswomen there and learning about how they did medicines and this and that and whoop-de-woo. And something that she developed was sort of like the precursor to breast milk, what she ended up working on, because that there was this disease that went around, often ravaging older children, and the name they give it more or less translates to the illness of the older child that happens when the next child comes along, because apparently they're not getting enough nutrients. And it's interesting that for the longest time, they reflected on it and went, oh, well, this is why the Africans are having all of these problems, because they don't know how to balance their nutrition, and we need to do that for them. And that this is sort of like the beginning of Nestle and all those other kind of massive mega corporations. But actually, it turns out that when they started observing and meeting with tribeswomen in areas where in the African equivalent that there was affluence, they just had variety in their diet. So the whole reason there was illness in the first place is because the reason they had hospitals and were helping out women is because they were poor. So they were in the poor areas helping out poor people who couldn't afford the African version of medicine, healthcare, food, and all the rest. So it just translates to literally the exact same thing. When you don't have power, when you're poor and don't have access to resources, you are limited in what you can eat. So this disease that would go around affecting children came about during their developmental stages because they didn't have enough protein, they didn't have enough stuff going in their systems because they didn't have access to it. But kids growing up in the areas where they had shit were doing perfectly fine. So it would make sense from a worldwide perspective that no matter which people group you're talking about, logically, when everyone's kind of working together, there's probably a nice wide variety of food. Vitamins and minerals are probably being accounted for in the local food system, whether it's through meat proteins, plant proteins, and people probably just made do with like what was going on. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Like you say, it's interesting to think about because, of course, in a world that has been colonized, so much of that history and information is lost. And so there's probably an element to it where we can only speculate rather than go to people and ask, which is sad.
It is sad. And also, like, I might be biased in this one. I know there's Google that people could just search for, but also one thing that I'm also concerned about is how usually those articles are written by non-natives, meaning it could be a false information. That's the only thing I am concerned about is every time I say Google is free for y'all, but also part of me is thinking is like, I hope like they actually take their time to research who's the editors, who wrote these articles, who's the photographers of these articles, etc. That way they know that if it's actually Indigenous related or not. If it's not Indigenous related, then that technically view as a stereotypical bullshit against us as well. And I think one right there is one of the most difficult thing to, what's the word, decolonize within civilians and also Indigenous people as well. And I couldn't talk hours and hours and hours about this, but we get the idea of it, at least the tip of the iceberg, and we could just dive down to it. But I know we don't have much time for that. But you know what I mean? It's so complex it's so to pinpoint everything from the first century till this generation. It's so complicated, and I cannot stress that enough when I talk to people about this.
Listen, it sounds to me like the simple answer there is do your damn research, do your homework, look at the authors, look at bias, look at the bias, for fuck's sake. Here's a good one. Yeah. Even if you just wanted to strip the Indigenous and look at fat-related things, an article comes out that says fat is bad. Who wrote that? It's based on this research. Who funded that research? Because I guarantee you that if it was funded by any kind of organization that has stakes in dieting, medicine, and healthcare, that is bias. That is bias. The whole reason they conducted that research was to find that information.
Exactly.
So you can't talk that information is legit. We need to, as the modern generation, listen, we got access to all this shit. We need to be better with it. Use the noggin and look. Click on the link. You know, like when you go to Wikipedia and it's got them little links that takes you to like the references at the bottom. Click on the references. Look at the titles. Look at the author and go from there. Just have a look.
Yeah.
Open mind.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, if you're on your phone for 24/7, I'm pretty sure you have time to do some research, at least for 30 minutes. Then on social media, I'm pretty sure everyone can do this. It's not that difficult to do that, to be honest with you. I mean, we're adults at the end of the day, so it should be a common thing going on. Just research about people and how to communicate better with others as well. Well, for this topic with Indigenous people.
So we were going to ask as well, you know, what is the gaming community like amongst specifically Native American folks? But you've said that to a large degree there isn't a lot because even you yourself don't necessarily know very many Native American folk in the gamer community.
I don't know many people. Like, all I know is that one person from Instagram, the one I just met, and also another one who was from Canada, who I talk to time to time. That's the only two people I know of. That's it. And I wish I could give you more answers about that. But the thing is, like I said before, is it just becomes so biased of what I'm doing, like, to my gainers, and I grow them out of, you know, pleasure. But also another side of me is like, don't do that shit, because we're dealing with our own health problems too because of that too. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm just in a weird dilemma right now, and I'm still figuring things out too. And I always talk to my best friend Alex about it. By the way, Alex, aka Slasher Abs reference. I normally talk about this with him all the time, and him and I, we talked about this almost 24/7 about this. And sometimes we wonder whether we're doing the right thing or not, or we're doing something that would make us happy, rather than what is not right by the social culture of America. And it just gets complex about this type of topics. But one thing I can tell you though is how I don't regret me being part of the gainer community, because I knew that since I was a kid, and I always feel like an outcast about this weird fetish. But the fact that I found y'all and I get to talk to these wonderful people and make good friends from there, I don't regret that one bit at all. And the only thing, if that time will comes about this whole controversial topics about my people and gaining, then I'll be more than willing to have an open conversation about that. Because if you're not uncomfortable in the conversations, then something's wrong there. We're not making progress. I'm just saying, because if you're not like uncomfortable, then something is wrong. Like, something you're not getting through your head. That's how I view it too. And the fact how I'm feeling uncomfortable thinking about the dilemma between, you know, this whole health situation of my people, but also the thing I want to do is total opposite of that, is that's something that I at least want to try to get some perspectives on. That way, at least people can understand both sides of the story. Because at the end of the day, I'm biased. Everyone's biased to their own thing. So yeah, that's
Ooh,
what I believe. To be honest with you,
go 100. Listen, I think we could stop the episode there. God damn it! I think that was the point. It's like if you are not uncomfortable with these conversations, you're not having the conversations properly.
no,
Because I'm white. I need to have these conversations if I want to undo and decolonize my brain. I've got to have these conversations if I want to address implicit bias and the shit that I can sit here till the cows come home and say to myself, I know I'm not racist because of X, Y, Z. But I know for damn sure that powwow made its way to Australia and into my little noggin. That's at least one. That's at least one Native American detail. I had to realize and work out. And it's all of those moments. You've got to truly put yourself in uncomfortable positions. And, similarly to your point of sometimes you don't know what you do with that dilemma of there's this health problem, but also I get turned on and I love it and we engage and it's a back and forth, a back and forth. There's almost the point of there is no answer because the true of the answer is going to be different for everyone.
yeah,
The fact that you have the thought alone, the fact that you go through and have that internalized dilemma alone means that you are still digging through the crud that is within you and working it out. We as gainers who get fat have to do that without fat phobia right from the start.
mm-hmm.
Because how the fuck else are you going to go from being a skinny bitch to a fat bitch and be happy about it?
Exactly.
You've got to dig through your fat phobia. You've got to get uncomfortable. You've got to address this shit. And if you don't, you're going to be that person who puts on 100 pounds real quick, loves it. Doctor tells you you've had like a blood spike for half a second, and then you're like, ooh, I've got beta type 74. I've got to lose 1,000 pounds and cut off my foot. It's like, it's too much, sis. If you just took a bit of time to work through all that, maybe you would feel more at peace with making decisions.
Definitely. And also I want to say, with out of respect, like I really respect non-natives who actually own up their mistakes about I cannot speak. I'm sorry. Misconception about my people. I really give respect huge on those people who admit their mistakes, what they're gonna do to move forward and promise they're not gonna do it again. I respect those people a lot more than this whole I'm not racist, that kind of deal, because like I had enough. Like, we're adults here. Just admit your mistakes. And this isn't just about racism. It's a common theme for all of us as humans. Just accept your mistakes. What are you going to do about it, and move forward with it? And then you could do better, and you could build better relationships with anyone. Well, particularly in the gaining community, because I know there's a lot of mistakes we've done in the past. I know there is, but yeah, we're over here decolonizing our minds, and by doing so, tackling these mistakes we've done in the past and what we do to move forward. So that's one thing that I give respect for those who've done that. And I'm pretty sure there's a good amount of you, for those who are listening right now. And for those who don't, looking into that, I would just start doing it. Start becoming uncomfortable. And I promise you that it's going to get harder first, but it's going to be better at the end of the tunnel. I promise you. Then you have all these new words that you have gained, new acknowledgement that you have gained, also new perspectives in your life as well, depending on what race you are, depending where you're coming from, etc. It depends who you are as a person.
Is there an indigenous dish that is like you would recommend for gainers?
Navajo tacos.
Navajo tacos.
So good.
Okay, so hang on. I think we had this conversation.
How do they differ from like what I would perceive as a regular taco? Just like the meat, the cheese, the shell.
Okay. Like a shell. Right, yeah, shell, meat, cheese, lettuce, tomato, guac, sour cream in it.
All right, shell. Let me explain it to you real quick. First of all, think of it as a tostada, okay? Have that image in your head. Now you have this big fry bread out of dough, you deep fry it, and once that's done, use that as a base. From there, you put beans and meat first, and depending on what order you put, there's shredded lettuce and there's diced tomatoes, and then there's cheese on top, and then there's sauce on top of it, depending on what kind of sauce you want. And there's your Navajo tacos. Now that's usually common in a ceremony as I cannot speak. I am so sorry. In powwows or ceremonial purposes, as part of like as a gathering as well. And I will tell you 100%, I miss Navajo tacos since I left California. And I was going to go to the powwow here in Maryland, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, there's not many going on because the pandemic is hitting my people too hard right now. But that's another story. But going back to food, though, it's a giant ass tostada. Just think of it like that. It's so good, so scrumptious. I highly recommend get those all the time. That will get you full and bloated. And I would love to see that to my gainers.
Ooh. I mean, girl. The moment you said tostada, I was like, oh, okay, the bitch is sold. I'm here. I'm ready. Girl, feed it to me now.
And
feed them good.
You had me with full and bloated.
I am kind of curious. When it comes to gaining, is there a Native American person that you can think of from like film or television? Obviously not necessarily a gainer, just like a fat indigenous person who you looked at and was like, that's it. That's the look. Big, gorgeous, sexy. Boom.
No, there isn't. And there's not many of them like that, to be honest with you. But recently, well, it's not gaining related, but I haven't seen too many of them, to be honest with you, that makes it, yes, that's the one. No, unfortunately, I haven't. Just non-natives where I was growing up. But one thing I could tell you though, so if you're into watching those indigenous what's the word I'm looking for, sitcoms, there's this version of Schitt's Creek called Rutherland Falls that's on Peacock if anyone's interested in watching it. And there's a hit series called Reservation Dogs, where you can also watch it on Hulu as well. And there's much more series about indigenous people. And I would seriously highly recommend watching it. But to answer your question, I wish there is people who are gaining, or big people of my people. I wish 100%. And I wish I could give you an answer, but it's so difficult not seeing too many of them.
Viewer or listener asked, how do you decide when you hold someone accountable for what they say or do? And what is your process for doing that?
Oh, that's a good one. So first of all, if I have their phone number, I would seriously call them up and, hey, meet me up. There's something we need to talk about. And then from there, I will flat out say, listen, you've done this A, B, and C, and D, and here's why. And from there, I will tell them straight up, like, this is straight up fucked up. You need to hold yourself accountable on this one because this is not okay. And another thing, well, not another thing, the next step is have him admit his mistakes. And obviously, I wanted to know why he, she, they would do something like that. And once I understand their reasoning behind all this, like I would ask them, what are you going to do to move forward to make this stop again and make sure that that shit never happen again? And if the person obliged and admit the mistakes and vow not doing it again, that's how I know that I held them accountable like this. Because to be honest with you, if you don't hold people accountable, you're going to see a lot of bullshit in your life, and basically the person going to do it and again and again and again if you don't do the accountability process.
No, I like that. I think accountability, as much as in this situation is appropriate regards indigenous discretions. No, what's the word? Indigenous. When you do something wrong. Discrimination. When you done fuck things up with an indigenous person, accountability is important. But I almost feel like accountability is something we need to translate to like all forms of apology.
All forms.
All forms of apology. Like you fucking play with matches as a kid, accountability. You fucking smacked your sister, accountability. Because we do this thing where we're like, oh, say you're sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah, everything's fine now. Like, no, it's not fine.
No, It's just words. We need to see action to move forward.
Action. We need to see the process, start to finish. And if we teach people that, especially from a younger age, one, they know that they can't just say sorry and get away with it, that they're going to have to like showcase evidence, which means effort. But also two, it's going to make us a lot of us more discerning when it comes to fuck ups and knowing when people are doing the work.
And that whole accountability, that happens so much in the gaming community, and I've seen so many times already. Like, not just coming from me, but from many people that I know of, they still do that to this day. And also, I know Alex is one of them because I've been there on his side doing a lot of accountability, a lot of, roasting people. Like, he's one of the good examples of holding accountability. And for those who don't know Alex, I seriously, seriously recommend following him on Instagram, Slabs of Abs. He's literally my best friend in the gaming community, and I'm so fucking blessed like to have him next to me. So yeah, go give him a follow, y'all.
And check out his episode, Confidence, Compliments, and Consciousness.
And I heard it, and I fucking love him. So proud of him.
We have another question that asks, how do you combat colonization and resolve it?
So this is a very interesting one. I'm actually an artist, a digital artist, and a physical artist as well. So I use my art as a way to display pain and also display my trauma, and use that in a way to tell all the non-natives to fuck themselves, fuck you, you did this shit kind of deal. I just want to show them like what is a projectile of your words and your actions to my people, and what if I do that to you as well. And I have this piece called "Don't Fuck With Me, Colonizer," and it's on my profile on Instagram, where that one is supposed to trigger non-natives, particularly white people, and make them feel like shit in a way where how they're making us feel like shit. So that's how I combat decolonization and also combating discrimination and racism. And I still do that today as well. And also using myself as a prime example of, I am not your fucking mascot. I am not your fucking doll that you be playing with my image like that. So if you want to see more of my artwork that comes with decolonization and me roasting colonizers, you're more than welcome to follow me on Instagram of littleberto17, and I'll be more than happy to talk more about it, of my artwork when it comes to decolonization.
I wish I was that clever when it came to that. I've just had to cut people out, due to various reasons. And something like, it made me think of this specific episode, made me think of a guy that I used to mess around with years ago. Daddy type, hot, big round ball belly, all that stuff. But one thing that he did that always bothered me was he would portray Christopher Columbus in the Christopher Columbus Day parade. And when the conversations would ever come to, well, it shouldn't be Columbus Day, it should be Indigenous Peoples Day, well, he'd be the first one to stand up and be like, well, I'll play Christopher Columbus in that parade every year. I don't see a problem with it. And I was like, okay, I really got to reevaluate why I'm around you. Like, you're just doubling down. You're just completely happy to play a genocidal maniac. And that kind of bothers me.
We've had this conversation before. The gays, they're very willing to overlook transgressions.
Oh, they still
for the
do
sake
that.
of dick. The gays. That's our cultural challenge. You gotta take the dick goggles off, baby, and look at the man and decide if you want to be affiliated with that dick.
Yeah, speaking of the gays, like, unfortunately, I hate saying like that, the gays. Now, the reason I say the gays is simply because they wouldn't stop fetishizing me just because of my skin color and my hair color and how I look. I will stress this enough. I am not exotic creature as they kept describing me. I am no fucking object. I don't know what the hell, like you're in to fetishize me like that, but don't you dare like fetishize me and my people like that, because I'm not going to forgive you ever, and I will fucking hold you accountable if I have to. And that same goes for people of color as well.
So this actually is great, a question to come along after we just had this conversation. Recently, it was Indigenous Day in America. How did you spend it? And how do you encourage others to spend theirs?
So Indigenous Day in America. So I was working on Indigenous Day where I was teaching my students, and I'm an art teacher, where after the lesson is over, I will give them like little snippets of Indigenous Day, giving fun facts about people, Indigenous Day. Well, for example, when I told my students, like, there is a recognized tribes of 574 tribes recognized, where there's thousands who are unrecognized or extinct. And also that I actually show them my language in front of them. I mean, I legit speak in front of them of what kind of language I speak and how I speak it, my dialects. I literally show them examples of it where I encourage them to use Google to do little basic research about, Indigenous People Day or Native Americans in general. Again, be very careful with your research. And also just to help y'all understand, let me speak about language real quick. So, Gawazi dohadame siushka koa kremesta kuya washista. So I said, my name is Roberto, and also known as Siushka, Roadrunner. I'm a tribal member of Pueblo of Laguna in a village called Mesita. So that's called Kurisan. So that's one of the examples that I did for my students on Indigenous Peoples Day. And often when I'm going to Instagram, and even besides Indigenous Peoples Day, I always post almost every story, anything that is Indigenous related, almost every single day. And I try to be consistent of it, not just about the arts, but also from the media, the social life, the health and medicine, the decolonization, the city life, anything that is related to indigenous communities. And also, I don't just post about the traumas. No, not just traumas. I also post about something that is lifting their spirits, like
joy.
Yeah, like there's people who are actors, or someone who become a top-notch doctor, or someone become a badass teacher, or something like that. Basically sharing their accomplishments as part of continuation of Indigenous Peoples Day. And the slogan that I always go with, and so many of them does the same thing though, is that every day is Indigenous Day. Every day is Indigenous Day. Not just one day, every day is Indigenous Day as long as we exist. That's how I encourage them to look into Indigenous people always. Same thing with the students and staff and my colleagues as well.
Something that I was curious about was when people find out that you are Indigenous, do they automatically assume that like all Indigenous people come from the same tribe and that they all know the same things and that that you all know each other, and that like if they ask you some kind of question, you're just going to immediately have the answer for it, even if it's a tribe that has nothing to do with your tribe or lived in a completely geographical different location? Because I feel like that's something that happens, like gay people often have that happen to them just for the sake of being gay. So I was wondering if that happens to you.
When it comes to non-educated people, yes, it does happen all the time. However, though, there are a good amount of people in my life, not only that when they found out I'm Indigenous, the first thing they ask me is, what tribe are you from? I love that, the fact you ask me what tribe I'm from, that way they won't mistake me for another tribe. I really enjoy the fact how people want to get to know me little by little by asking me questions. To be honest with you, I prefer be asking me questions about my heritage than giving assumptions about me, because one, again, I will say this again, there's 574 recognized tribes and there are thousands who are unrecognized or extinct. So that's something to be mindful of as well.
Have you ever been out for like a costume party around Halloween time and you see somebody wearing an extremely stereotypical, probably very offensive costume, and they're like, "Oh, I'm an Indian chief."
All the time. No, unfortunately, not just Halloween, but also the mascots of the Redskins, Washington Redskins. But now the Redskins are gone. There's not many incidents of fans wearing Indigenous costumes, which I am very thankful for. But there are still teams out there who are misrepresenting us in a very bad stereotype imagery of us. That we're still working on that to decolonize that and make sure they don't do that shit ever again. So it's not just Halloween, it is unfortunately in the sports culture as well.
So here in Cleveland, there was just a big hoopla about changing the Cleveland Indians. It's been the Cleveland Indians for I don't know how long at this point.
Very long.
But I always thought that it was inappropriate. I never thought that it was okay to have the mascot be named Chief Wahoo. I never thought any of that was okay. And they just recently started changing it over. Now they're going to be called the Guardians, which is like a nod to some of the architecture that we have here in Cleveland. And people flipped their shit. People got so pissed off. They're like, "You can't change the name of that." I was like, who fucking cares?
Oh, go.
Who fucking cares? They suck anyway. They've always sucked. They've never won. I mean, they get into the World Series all the time, but they lose constantly. So what the fuck do you even care?
Burn. But I fucking agree with you, because the fact here's the thing, like, every time I be telling people about the real story about the genocide, people told me to get over with. Now I'm gonna tell the colonizers the same thing. Fucking get over with. You can do it because I can do it too because y'all told me so. So do it.
Nobody ever says to a Jewish person, get over the Holocaust. Never.
Oh,
I've
they would
never
say
heard
that.
anyone say that.
Oh, they would say that to
Mm,
Jewish people all the time. Unfortunately, they would say that to us all the time. And I would say, you know what? You get the fuck over it because your team is gone now because that doesn't belong with you in the first place anyway.
Girl.
Wait. Yes.
Babe, that's so nice. Oh, I love that. Gee, the only thing I didn't ask, and I can't remember if we took this out of the questions like right near the beginning when we were working on this, was like, is there a way in Karisan where you would call someone like ooh fatty in like an endearing kind of a way?
I don't know, honestly. Like I've been looking into that list. I have documents of my language, but I don't see a word that is related to a big person or fatty. I don't see a word of that, but I'm still researching on that. After my grandfather passed away, so I will get back to you on that one.
Hey,
Where
listen.
exactly are things like that collected? Like, is it on the onus of the tribe to collect their own histories and documents?
Yes.
Or so there's no, you couldn't go to say like a university and or to an archive somewhere and find any of that? Like that is all contained within each individual tribe?
Well, also like there are in universities and also in institutes, there are indigenous professors who does archival research about their people. So there, if you happen to find an indigenous person who happen to be a professor in terms of indigenous studies, you will most likely find the information that you're looking for. Now, I don't know if you're not gonna, I don't know if you're gonna able to find the Pacific tribe or not, but you'll have an idea of it as well. Now, in terms of your Pacific tribe, for example, my tribe, then definitely I will find that back in my tribe in New Mexico as well. And also like unless there's like another elder who happens to speak the same language as me, then of course like I would take advantage of that as well. But I don't know how it is with other tribes because everyone's different in their own approaches. So
Is there any, so you know how like the Romance languages all sprung out of Latin? Is there any correlation? Like if, I'm trying to think of how to word this.
Like, is there a
Like we use the Rosetta Stone to decode other languages from other parts of the world, you know, and put it into Latin in ancient history. Is there a way that, is there any commonality between tribal languages? Are they also vastly different that you can't like, there aren't similarities or tones or words? Like I'm just curious about it because like if I hear a French word, if I know the Latin behind it, I can decode what the word means. But I don't know if that works the same way with indigenous languages.
from my observation and from my research, it is vastly different from generic languages. And what I mean by that, though, it is so different that if you go on Google Translate, my language is not there at all. Same thing with indigenous languages at all, because it is so different in the dialect. It is so heavy. It is so hard to pronounce as well compared to generic languages as well. So my thing is that if you're trying to go back to listen to your language again, you're most likely going to find it by your elders or anyone who can speak that language as well. But if you're going to try to do Google Translate or Rosetta Stone or any language programs, I can tell you 100% you're not going to find that one bit, unfortunately. But I'm pretty sure there are actually tribes out there are working on that right now. Not Rosetta Stone necessarily, but creating their own archival data of the language as well. And also, I'm trying to work on mine as well.
Because I imagine trying to learn a language without ever actually seeing it in, in a printed manuscript or on a tablet or any other way that people all over the world have learned languages since the dawn of time. Like that's got to be, to learn a language solely by word of mouth has to be really difficult.
So to kind of wrap things up for the episode, I want to ask one last question. You know, you've spoken to us about this experience of being Indigenous in the community and a little bit about how you balance that with gaming and the plus size experience and the back and forth and all of those moments that go on for you, which is this multifaceted, complex moment that when engaging, people need to be mindful of and respectful of. What can we do as allies to do better?
This is very simple, but mind you, the way I taught this is out of love. Shut up and listen. That's it. Shut up and listen. I said this with love. Reason I say that though is once you shut your mouth up, you're gonna hear everything what you need to hear, like from my people, and that will seriously benefit you and benefit me. That way, this is where the relationships of allies started to form as in one. So that's how you would start as step one. Now, step two though is if you're really serious about helping my people out, share articles about our struggle, share articles about anything that is accomplishments, share any indigenous articles that can help support combat the white man's game. Be an ally, be with us. No need to compare yourself to me, because obviously you and I are different, but we're still in the same land together. Now that y'all in my land, I need to be welcoming to all of y'all if we want to defeat the white man's game together. So that is my advice to everyone. Shut up and listen and support.
Nice and simple. That brings us to the end of the episode. Berto, thank you so much for being here, baby, and sharing yourself. Thank you so much.
So thank you to you both.
So I want to ask a little quick question here, just because, as you've said, there's unfortunately not much opportunity for there to be community amongst Native American and Indigenous people on Grommr. Are you open to people reaching out to you, Indigenous folk who are maybe looking for a bit of community, people who are looking for someone to have a conversation with?
Oh, fuck yes. I will be your father. I will be your mentor. Fuck yes. If y'all Indigenous, but part in the gaining community into your lives, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to create space for all of y'all. Trust me, I will make sure that you feel safe and you feel welcoming. I promise y'all. So fuck yes, reach out to me.
Baby, there you go. And on that note, where the fuck can people find you online, Berto? Tell what are the links? What are the handles?
Okay, so obviously I mentioned about Instagram. So Instagram at littleberto17. And I recently opened a discreet account so I could be live with y'all majority of the time. It's called Hello, It's Me _95. And I would type that in the chat. I will. So
Gorge, love that. Well, that brings us to the end of yet another episode of Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a good review. If you like this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. As always, you can find me on Grommr, Instagram, and TikTok at stannnum, and Twitter and YouTube at stannnum.bsky.
And you can find me on Grommr as Orpheus. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Mouse. And of course, you can find more of what we've talked about today on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Patreon at Thicc Radio. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Thicc Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stan.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Body by Train.